Hello, my name is John, and I'm a nerd.
Today we're talking to the amazing and wonderful Andrew Thomas, who is an artist and letterer, has done cover art and drew the art for Canuck Adventures, and has done lettering in quite a few places. So welcome. And thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, John.
Yeah, no problem. Anything that I've been tearing you away from that you?
No, if anything, this is a bit of a break from the norm, and the usual day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm doing great. How have you been?
Good. I've been doing well. Been avoiding the COVID thing pretty well so far. Mm-hmm. And how are your kids doing?
Everyone's doing fine, enjoying the summer. We're trying to get out as much as we can. I mean, the weather's been pretty great for the most part, apart from the few dry or a few heat, humidity. It's been, I think it broke a couple days ago. So now we've had some really nice days of cool air, so
yeah, it's been a little bit cooler
really
here
nice.
The last couple of days too. So since we're talking about kids, let's look back in time to back when Andrew Thomas was a kid. Did you read comic books when you were younger?
I read some. I don't think I really started reading seriously. I didn't really get really into it until I was in high school, and the library in my school had a nice selection of Batman graphic novels, and I remember reading. I started. That's where I first started reading The Long Halloween. The Dark Knight Returns. I read a lot of. There was a lot of Batman, so I read a lot of the essential Batman graphic novels. And then I read some Spider-Man. Like I started reading Ultimate Spider-Man, and even to this day, I think I have this huge omnibus, and I still haven't gotten through it. Like I'll read it a little bit at a time, and then when I sit down to start reading it, I'll just go right to the beginning and read and start all over again.
Yeah.
So I think I
remember what happened.
Exactly. So yeah, that was. I was also reading. I read a lot of manga too in high school as well. I've always been a Dragon Ball, a Dragon Ball Z fan. So I would watch it. I read the manga, collecting the cards. I still do to this day. So yeah, it wasn't until then, and then I think really when the New 52 kicked off in 2011. That's when I really started collecting. Like I never collected it, when I was a kid. I never had.
Were you collecting the 52 itself, or things that came before that, or?
Yeah, mainly the New 52, but that's when I really jumped into it. So Batman has always been my favorite. So I figured, I'm gonna jump on the New 52 bandwagon, and I started collecting everything. And then Batman was the only one that I really read. And I loved it. And that's when I discovered, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, and then, just fell in love with the work that they've been doing. And all the stuff, even to this day, everything that they do is gold, at least in my eyes. So that really took a real huge impact, especially on me at once, as an artist looking at Greg Capullo's work. So I will just go and devour anything that he that he does. Yeah. And then when they came out with the unwrapped edition of Court of Owls, it was just the penciled version of the entire book, and I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. I've always wanted to see just Capullo's pencils. Yeah. So it kind of went from there, and that's kind of just kind of took that ride from one artist to the next, and really finding the things that I really enjoyed about comics, and it was a huge deep dive, which kind of really got me into wanting to make it, really. So
I'm guessing then, where you didn't get into comic books till you're older, that did you read like prose books at all, or?
Yeah, I read even during that time I was reading, like I read a lot of Harry Potter. I was growing up right at that time where he just came out. So as a kid, I jumped on that. I loved Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, those kind of books. So I read a lot as a kid, and then comics kind of came naturally after that.
Yeah.
And then
what was it about comic books that drew you in?
as an artist, I'd love to see how different artists interpret the characters, and
Right.
Every artist has their style. But I think the thing about comics is that it is just so welcoming, and there really is no limit to what you can do in comics, and so it gives you the creativity and freedom to really do anything.
Throwing the CN Tower.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you could do that in a movie, but it would cost millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But
and it just costs drawing.
And then there's also the liberty, and then the liberty that it gives you that when you're reading something, you already have the visual medium to kind of incorporate it, so that when you're reading a prose novel, I mean, sometimes you may interpret the visual a little differently than what the writer intended. Yeah. So, I mean, that way it takes away the guesswork, and you're just kind of enjoying the ride for what it is, and you can just focus on the facts or the focus on the story itself, which is really wonderful. So yeah, that it really, I just love how liberating the medium is.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. For me, I just love the spectacle of it, the fantasy of the story, the imagination of it, and the artwork combined. It's a really beautiful way to express imagination.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
That's what really got me about it. So, did you have friends or family or at all that were reading comic books that introduced you to it, or?
I think I kind of stumbled it on my own. I mean, I had friends growing up that lived in the same apartment building that I did, that we were big. Everyone happened to be a big, anime Dragon Ball fan. So we had, there certain things that we connected with. But when it came to comics and everything, I kind of just stumbled that on my own, and then I met a friend in high school, and then we kind of also connected from there. So then we would, he was into comic books too, so we just kind of found each other through a mutual love for comics, and so it kind of blossomed from there. But everything that I learned, or everything I knew about it, about like the news or anything that's coming out, I learned from him. So
that's cool.
So it was kind of fun to have a friend like that, in high school.
Where did you grow up? Were you always in the same area?
I was born in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and that's where I've lived for the last 31 years of my life until just recently. I moved out to here in Brantford, Ontario now. Which is about an hour and change southwest.
Was that a work-related choice? I'm being nosy.
No, no, not at all. It was, we had an opportunity to buy a house out here, and my wife and I, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, if we don't do this now, then we might not have this opportunity again. So we wanted to get out of Mississauga and just kind of settle down a little bit, more quieter neighborhood, and yeah, we haven't regretted the decision. It's wonderful out here.
Were you always interested in art yourself? What got you into drawing? Was it the comic books that got you into it?
No, I've actually been drawing for as long as I can even remember, and it definitely predates comics. I don't remember exactly when it started, but all I knew is that I was the doodle bug in the family, and I would doodle in class, get in trouble for it. I draw. I had binders and binders full of paper and notebooks and sketchbooks and everything that I could draw on. I practically did it. Surprisingly, I didn't draw on the walls as a kid. At least
my brother painted the wall with a castle and a dragon.
That's cool. Yeah, never did that. I mean, I've had requests to do that. It's like, oh, can you paint my bedroom wall? I'm like, I'm not really a painter. I mean, I can probably do a nice big pencil sketch, or
and then somebody else can paint it.
It'll take me a truckload of Copic markers to fill that in. But no, I'm not really. I'm not much of a painter.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's what it was. And then I as a kid, I kind of had this idea that I always wanted to be an artist, and or I wanted to work for Disney, you know, and be an animator. And so that as a kid, that was kind of like the goal that I had when I grew up. I think, you know, a couple of relatives may have argued that, saying, oh, you probably should do something else, or, you know, do something smarter, or, you know, worthwhile,
something more promising.
Exactly. But no, I think I just kind of stuck to my guns, and I just kind of you know, stuck to the plan. And while I'm not, you know, working for Disney, although I did letter for Disney,
did a letter?
I did a letter. No, I did. You know, I did a few issues of Disney Princess. So I mean, I could technically say that I did. So at least there's that.
More than I have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, I think that was just naturally the career path I kind of wanted to take, and whether it was, you know, which form it was going to be, I guess that was kind of up in the air.
Did you slightly different subject, but did you play sports in school?
Not really. I mean, I did play soccer a couple times as a kid, even in school. I played, you know, some just house soccer. A couple of like the local kids clubs kind of thing. But I mean, growing up, sorry, I
got my water too. So
growing up in I guess a Portuguese household, soccer was always, you know, you couldn't go far without someone mentioning soccer or watching it or something.
Playing it in the streets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we played. There was a nice park behind the building, so we would play soccer all the time there. So other than that was really the extent of it.
Now, did you have any? You mentioned a couple of comic book artists, but before you got into comics, did you have any particular influences or people that you admired, as far as maybe following their art style a little bit with your own twist?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying before, that Greg Capullo was a huge inspiration for that, because there was this thing about him, especially when he was on doing Spawn. But there was this thing about his style where he put in a lot of detail, and there was a lot of grit in his style. But he still kind of pulled it back and kind of didn't make it like photorealistic or you know, hyper realism. He still pulled it back and kind of gave it a cartoony comic look. And I remember even reading one of his tweets that he says that if he thinks that it looks too hyper realistic or looks photorealistic, he'll erase it and kind of and redraw it so he can pull it back. Which was something I appreciated. So, and that kind of really, that sense of a simplistic style mixed with grit and detail. I mean, it sounds like an oxymoron a little bit, or counterintuitive, but I mean, like, you have this high level of detail, but the style overall, you know, it isn't overly complex.
Right.
So that theme kind of tend to repeat, because I also then I started reading probably one of my all-time favorite series is the book Chew, that's by Image Comics, written by John Layman and art by Rob Guillory, and looking at his style, he broke all kinds of rules when he was doing it. Like, he had the cartoony, it was a cartoony, blocky style, but it still had a grit to it. It still had this level of detail, this grounded feel to it. It's remarkable, because it really did elevate the medium for me. So it's like, wow, and it kind of gave me this whole new sense of realization. Like, don't try to be Capullo, don't try to be like a Jim Lee or people who that they have these amazing, they have highly detailed styles. And then for me, it's more like I enjoy cartoons. I enjoy. It kind of goes back to the whole, me wanting to work with Disney. That's sort of, cartoony style, but also throwing in that extra element, with it. So it's a nice blend. And then going into Scotty Young, and then so Scotty Young again does that as well. He has these baby Marvel covers that he's been doing for years and other books, but then you look at it and it's simple, but it's still highly stylized. So those three really, for the most part, have been pretty instrumental, for my style. And even to this day, I don't think I necessarily have one like a particular style. I still kind of teeter back and forth with different things, with different looks.
Yeah, I've noticed that you do some kind of, like you said, kind of the more cartoony style, and then when you want to, you can do the very hyper realistic style. But
I don't think I'm happy doing one or the other. I think I've always kind of came to the realization that for the most part the project itself will kind of call for what style I want to use. Yeah. So it says, oh, let's do, this project is more cartoony, so let's do more cartoony, or this project needs to be like Auric, then we'll just kind of stick with that. So it's almost like I have a style for different things that I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think the cover that you did with the female Captain Canuck, that I think is a good example of sort of what you're talking about, where it's very realistic, but it's very cartoony at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that was a really interesting piece of artwork to look at, because it's very it's hyper realistic, but it's also very unrealistic at the same time.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I thought of when you were talking about doing the realistic but cartoony sort of thing, something like that. Is that what you were talking about? Or
you can definitely see it in some of my more recent works, more recent images. You can see that that I'm kind of adopting that style, or that blend of styles, I would say. And for the most part, I'm quite happy with the results. So yeah, I think it's working.
Do you remember the first piece of art that you did that you were really, really happy with and thought it was really good?
I think after I started, or when I decided to started doing comics or pinups, this was kind of after I graduated from college, which I went there for game design. So it was a completely different. It was a departure from, like, I guess, traditional illustration or animation, but I wanted to make learn how to design video games and whatnot. But after I graduated, I kind of really wanted to go back to traditional animation illustration, and I found myself doing a lot of pinups, and the one that really stood out for me, like, was one of the first ones that I did, and I still think it's one of my favorites to this day. It's the one with Batman. He's kind of crouched down on one knee, and he's holding a Robin on his finger. And basically, it was supposed to be like a memorial piece to the death of Robin. So I think it was, I forget what year it was. It must have been 2013, 2014. There was a recent issue where Damian gets killed off, until he gets revived again a few months later, I think.
Going his grandfather's route.
Exactly. So that was probably one of the early pieces that I was really proud of, because it was a simple composition, but it was kind of had a powerful feel, a message, emotion. It's just looking at Batman in a vulnerable state. That's right. She's my daughter's. She's helping me out here.
Yeah, we like that kind of help.
There was there was someone that I was tabling with at a con way back when, and he just kind of pointed out, he's like, yeah, you don't see a lot of posters of Batman in this pose. Like everything is all an action pose, a jumping pose, like a on top of a building.
It's almost a passive pose.
Exactly. So, I mean, you look at this one and it's like, this is different. This is, Batman in a vulnerable state, in a state of mourning and mourning over Robin kind of thing. Yeah. So even to this day, it's still, whenever I go to a con, I'll still sell a few copies of that, which is pretty nice.
Was that one that was actually printed in like the trade version of it, or was that just something that you did as a commission for people who wanted to?
No, that one was just a print that I would bring to a convention.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. It wasn't a commission. Although I think about maybe a year or so later, someone commissioned me to do the opposite. So they wanted a female Robin from, I think it was Earth 2 or Earth 3. I'm not sure which one. Mm-hmm. I think it's where it's Helena becomes Robin. And they wanted a similar pose, but she's holding a bat instead.
Oh.
Yeah, so I did that one too. So I had them side by side, and it was pretty cool.
Kind of in a similar vein, what was, if you remember, the first piece of art that you got paid for?
That is a good question. I think it actually predates the convention, where I was doing freelance work and I got paid to actually design a mobile game. So someone reached out and he says, "Hey, I have this game that I want to put together for the iPhone, and I need someone to design all these elements and all these things." So I did, and it was a great learning experience. Even to this day, I still won't play it because it was a good experience, but I don't think it was it's definitely not reflective of what I can do now. But it was a cool feeling to say, hey, I'm getting paid to make a game, something I actually went to I went to school for this and learned how to do stuff. And so, but the first commission in terms of comics, I can't say that I do. I don't have the greatest memory, so I don't think so. I don't think I can recall exactly.
Now, did you, when you got into professionally doing comic books, did you start doing art first or the lettering first?
Art, definitely. I definitely started doing art first, and it wasn't until I decided to do my very first indie comic that the thought of lettering had ever crossed my mind, because I was talking, and I believe it was Doug at Paradise Comics in Toronto. I think I was talking to him one day about the indie comic and the idea of like how to market it and how to get it on the shelves of stores and stuff like that. And and I think it was him that he gave me probably the best advice that I'll ever have gotten. And he says, if you're going to do that, make sure you learn how to letter. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he says, you could have the greatest art. You could have commissioned this book to be drawn by Jim Lee or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you don't learn how to letter, and it's going to completely take people out of the experience. Poor lettering will ruin a book.
Yep.
And lettering is only good when it's completely invisible, to the book. Because lettering a comic has its own style. So you can't take a simple clip art of a balloon with a tail and then use Comic Sans or whatever other generic font and throw it onto a comic and then call it a day. No, there's a whole art behind it. So I'm like,
you've created your own font, correct?
I did. Yeah. I recently just did learn how to do that, and it was a terrifying experience because I've always had absolutely terrible handwriting. Chicken scratch. It
Me
was
too.
absolutely terrible. So, I mean, I'm kind of like looking at it, and this was like a weeks long process where I'm just kind of looking at the different fonts, designed by different letterers and how they kind of approach how they approach the different letters and different glyphs and punctuation and all the other markings. So slowly I just kind of I may have probably redone that process 4 or 5 times, but once I found something that I was happy with, I took it into Adobe Illustrator and I cleaned it up, and then there's this really cool program that you import all the glyphs and all the letters that you have, and it automatically kind of does all the kerning and sizing, between the letters or in the spacing, from one row to another. It does that all automatically. Yes, an actual pro will actually do that manually, and that will take a week on its own. So,
Yeah.
but as for a trial, this was definitely a first attempt. It's definitely going to be the first of quite a few, because I definitely want to, do it properly. But I've always told myself that, if you really want to take this position seriously, you have to do it at least once. So I'm like, okay, and I did, and I'm actually surprisingly happy with how that first attempt turned out. And like I said, it was foolish for somebody with chicken scratch handwriting to attempt their own font. So that's why I call it I call it Fat Man's Folly. And I'm actually considering using it in an upcoming project or something. So I'm gonna probably use it privately, personally. Maybe I'll do some signs for conventions using that font. Or I
What
might
did you say the name of it was?
Fat Man's Folly. So
Fat Man's Folly.
yeah, Fat Man's
The Fat
Folly.
Man Who Letters, yes.
Exactly. That's my So that's my handle, and that's the I guess the nickname I kind of go with now. So I mean, like, why not?
A little self-depreciating, but
It's okay. So that was an experience, and I'm glad I did it, because
what was the name of that comic?
Which one?
The one that you did your first lettering on, that you
the very first indie book that I did. It was called Posthuman, and the whole premise of that was, what if Inspector Gadget, the old cartoon from the 80s, what if that was rebooted into a dark, gritty, post-apocalyptic setting? So I teamed up with a writer, and I had this vision in my head, and we really we really went at it. Like, we at least attempted, and we had the first issue was, came out. It was okay, and we didn't continue it because I think we had a lot of creative differences, and I'm like, I don't really think this is what my vision is. I don't think this is where. So I kind of shelved it indefinitely. So you never know. Maybe one day I'll revisit it and do it again, because I think it was a fun premise. But at least, in the meantime, I have quite a bit to occupy my time.
At what point then did you get connected up with Chapter House at the time?
So with Chapter House at the time, this was, I've always known who Captain Canuck was, especially I started working at Gotham Central Comics in Mississauga. So I've met a lot of people through that store and through Carlos, the owner of the store, and so knowing who Captain Canuck was, and I love the idea of Canadian. I'm like, ooh, a Canadian superhero version of Captain America. So I think it was the second. Yeah, it was the second issue that was going to come out, and I kind of asked Carlos, I'm like, hey, would you ever consider sponsoring me to do a store variant for issue 2? And he says, okay. So he's like, well, let's I'll do you one better. I'll pay for half, you pay for the other half, and that way you can have copies. I'm like, sure, okay, great. So he did, and that was the very first cover for Captain Canuck that I did. And it was the one of Canuck in Quebec jumping off of the building that's exploding with the CN Tower in the background. Actually, the CN Tower kind of, I think, shows up a couple of times in my covers. I don't, or maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't. No, I can't remember.
We'll have to look at it and see.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the first time I did that. And I met a couple people through that process, but it wasn't really until I started going to conventions, especially with that cover in hand, that I actually got to meet people like Fadi Akeem, Keith Morris, Tony White, people who were very, who are still like, I guess they're intricate to Lev Gleason now, as it's known.
Yeah.
So
Gleason's Comic House.
That's right. So, and then I had that, and I also had Auric, the first couple issues, maybe the first issue of Auric with me. So I kind of got to know them a bit better over time, and then at one point I got a message on Facebook from Davis, who is my writing partner on Auric, and he's like, "Oh, Tony is asking if anybody knows how to letter," and I'm like, and he's like, "You know how to?" I mean, he knows I can do it because I've been lettering our own books. So he's like, "Oh, can I connect you guys?" And I'm like, "Sure." So he connects me with Tony, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, you know how to letter?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been doing it on my own books." He says, "Well, the current letter for Captain Canuck, he's unavailable, and we have a book that needs to go out as soon as possible." I'm like, "Holy crap!" I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Do you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, it's Captain Canuck! I actually get to work on a Captain Canuck book. It's lettering, but it's still Which
something. Issue was that? I'm sorry, I think you said
it was issue 10, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
Issue 10 of the regular series.
Yeah, now, I didn't remember where you took over.
the way it's categorized now, it's season 2, issue 4.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the way it goes now. But it was issue 10. So they gave me the entire element package. So everything, all the fonts that were used, all the different boxes, or all the different color schemes that were used for all the lettering elements. I'm like, okay. So I had to go back and kind of really study what the previous letter was doing.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay. And then kind of build it, like reverse engineer it from that. So I did it, and I turned it in. I think I turned it in within like a couple days or so, and that happened. So, and then I think some time came back, or some time went by, and they come back to me and says, "Oh, do you want to do issue 11 now?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to do issue 11." So it really came to pass that they just kept sending me books, and then we had that conversation where, well, we're going to be expanding the Chapter House brand. We're going to be introducing new titles that it's going to be part of the chapter verse, as it was called.
Yeah.
Like Freelance and Phantoma and Agents of P.A.C.T. and I'm like, and basically we want to offer you the in-house letterer position. I'm like, oh my god. So it was, and so suddenly we go from lettering a couple to
everything,
to lettering everything. So I'm like, oh wow. So then Freelance came out, Agents of P.A.C.T. came out, Phantoma came out, Northguard was also coming out, but I didn't do Northguard until season 2.
Okay.
Although when they started doing the trades for all the books, they went back to me, and I had to fix some of the a few edits from the previous volumes and the previous issues. So I still had my hand in the previous first 2 volumes of Captain Canuck and Northguard.
You were working on Auric before you got into Captain Canuck.
I believe so. I believe it kind of happened around the same time.
Yeah. Now you do artwork and lettering for that, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
How involved were you in the creative process of that?
So the story of Auric actually predates me, and it kind of goes back to, I think it was 2014 or 13, where artist Mike Ruth, if you're familiar with him,
he's done some stuff for Captain Canuck.
Yes, amazing artist, amazing guy.
Yep.
One of the greatest artists that I know of our age, really. He was commissioned to design a mascot for the convention up in Timmins, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And so they wanted to do a Comic-Con and they wanted a mascot. And at the time, the convention was partnered with the Lions Club. So he wanted to take the element of a lion and put it on on a human, like a anthropomorphic figure body, and he gave him a bow and arrow and a cape, and that was the character design. So then they had a contest for the name for the character, and then a woman by the name of Catherine Montigny, or she goes by Kitty. She came up with the name of Auric, and she is also one of the two ladies that owns the comic book store Jump City in Timmins. Mm-hmm. So they came up with the name, and there you go. You had Auric, the character for the convention. So Davis, who was also, he was on the board, I believe, or he was in charge of the artist alley portion of the convention. So he'd reach out to artists, say, "Hey, we're hosting this event up in Timmins. Do you want to come on down and be part of the artist alley?" So he did. So he reached out to me, and he says, "Hey, I've been following your work for some time. Do you want to come to our convention up in Timmins, for the show?" And it was kind of daunting at first, because I'm like, oh my God, driving all the way up to Timmins, like I've never made that trek, before. He's like, "Yeah, do you want to come on down?" I'm like, "Okay, that's cool." And I'm like, "Well, could we do something special for the show?" And he's like, "What are you thinking about?" I'm like, "Well, what if we did like could we create our own superhero, or let's do a comic about a superhero in Timmins?" And he's like, "Well, we actually already have one, so why don't we I'll secure the permission to use the character, and let's come up with a mini comic telling his origin, like where he came from and who he is and how he's integral to the city of Timmins." So I'm like, "Oh, that's a great idea." And he's like, "Okay, great. Do you have anybody in mind that you want to write it, or do you want to write it?" And I'm like, not much of a writer, really. So I'm like, "Do you have any suggestions?" And he's like, "Well, actually, I kind of write a little bit." And he showed me some examples of an old book that he did called E.H. Joe's, and it was like a comic strip kind of book, adult themed, almost like G.I. Joe's, but it's Canadian based. So I'm like, "Okay, this is cool." I mean, like, obviously it can't be, R-rated or anything. So
yeah,
he's like, "Yeah, well, no, we'll do it family friendly." And so he comes back with a 10-page, treatment for this book, and I'm reading it. I'm like, "Wow, this is something. I'm like, this is really cool. You really brought this character alive, and he has this history that is only hinted at, really, but most of it is left in mystery, and it's like a story for another day kind of thing." Mm-hmm. So he's like, he's going to be over 100 years old, and he's going to come out of retirement, to fight monsters and stuff like that. I'm like, this is a really cool idea. So we did that. So we drew it up together, or at least I drew it. I colored that first issue, lettered it, and then we had it printed, and we did only 200 copies, and we started promoting it. And next thing you know, Davis is telling me, "Oh, I'm getting requests for interviews from CTV and CBC Radio and all that stuff."
Oh, wow.
I'm like, "This is so cool." And then like their local newspapers, and so I even still have a clipping from that paper that's laminated, for the very first issue. So the time comes around, and I go and I drive up to Timmins, and it's an 8-hour drive from where I lived at the time, and we get there, and and then I think it was a 2-day show, and we all but sold out. So we almost sold 200 copies of the book. and he's like, and people were really responding to it, and we got a lot of great feedback, and so we sort of like, oh, this is great, let's do this every year for the show. So and then we decided to reprint it a second time, reprint it a second time, and then the next year, the next year's show, we had a different mini issue, and that was drawn by Sharon Gauthier, who is the colorist on the book. She's the regular series colorist, and she's also drawn. So she's like, I would say, I don't want to call her secondary artist, but she has done some of the pencil line work and coloring for a few of the issues, especially the Tall Tales spinoff that we did a few years later. But she did the art for that, the 20, I think it was the 2016 edition of the mini comic. So it was an annual. But we were getting a lot of feedback, positive feedback from everybody, and so Davis and I were talking, like, do you think we should turn this into a regular series? And he's like, yeah. I was like, I think we can come up with a great story. So that's how that's how it came to be. So that first issue that we did was renamed as issue 0, and then we did a regular issue 1 that we did to Kickstarter, and then we're up to in the regular series, we're up to issue 5. I'm still doing issue 6 after a couple of years, but it's only because I haven't had a whole lot
doing
of time.
Some other things now.
Exactly. Regretfully, I mean, like, I feel bad that it's taken this long, but on the flip side of that, we've done more. We've done more annual issues. We've done the Auric's Tall Tales, which is a small comic strip style, very kiddie friendly version of the character. And then we did a couple of other things. It was last year or the year before. Davis collaborated with like 8 other artists, and he did an anthology book called Auric Along Winter, and it was. The entire book is black and white, and it's silent. It's a completely silent book, and it chronicles the events of Auric just after he gets his powers in the early 1920s, I want to say. And then just this last couple of months, we had to Kickstarter, and then we teamed up with Mark Shainblum, who wrote the original Northguard, and legendary artist Dan Day, who's done work for everybody, every company imaginable. He's an amazing artist. We did a book called Auric, A God in Plastic, which I actually have right here. So that's I don't think you're going to see that. Right there, Auric, A God in Plastic.
That's a cool cover.
Yeah, Shane Kirshenblatt did the cover. Amazing. So this one we'll probably get a taste of. I don't know if he can.
Disappeared.
Yeah,
okay,
so you'll be able to see. The art, and it takes place in World War II. So this is a more so of like a flashback book, but it's going to be a 2-parter book, and we'll have the other one maybe early next year. But it was a real treat to have this character being interpreted and being written by Mark Shainblum, who's Canadian legends. Both Mark and Dan in their own rights are Canadian legends in terms of comics. So it was a real treat to do that book.
I have to confess, I've never read any of the Auric books, but now
okay,
I want to.
No, I'm kidding.
Now I want to. I want to. I was afraid I would. I don't know, get interested in it and then not be able to find more. But I'm gonna have to dig it out and dig it up somewhere and read it. It sounds really good, and the art looks really good too.
It's especially that book, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal art.
Going back and forth between Auric and Captain Canuck and all the other ones that you're working on. Do you end up finding yourself in conflict, or realizing that you did something for one that you should have done for something else, or anything like that ever happened to you?
No, I think really the Auric is kind of like the only one that the only book really that I have the liberty or the creative liberty to do something or to express. I mean, Davis writes the scripts, but his scripts are very they're more of like guidelines until he gets to the actual dialogue. Then yeah, we'll have to, the dialogue goes in as is, unless it needs to be trimmed down. But that's the whole editing process. But in terms of that, Auric is really the only one that I kind of have some more creative liberty than I do with any of the Lev Gleason books, because when it mostly Lev Gleason, it's lettering, so everything is already provided for me. I am taking the what's on the script and I'm translating it into the lettering art on the page. So there is, I mean, I get to there is a lot of design process in terms of, like, for example, sound effects. Sound effects are a great way, are a great art form that I actually get to play with, and kind of making them bold and dynamic. And so I'll get to do a lot of that. Or when I do the covers, I'll kind of I have an idea, or another idea is given to me, and I'll just kind of go on from there. So, but I don't really think I've ever crossed, or I don't think I've ever made that mix up where one thing was for the other. I think when it comes to, like, I can kind of zero in and focus on what the project needs.
Yeah,
I think I've gotten good at that over time. So I can't say that I've had that, but if I did, it was probably too minor to even notice. So
yeah. Okay, and just out of curiosity, has there, or what is a project that you've enjoyed the most, or do you have a favorite project that you've worked on so far?
Auric has definitely been one of my favorites, because it's given us a lot of really cool opportunities, and I've gotten to meet a lot of cool people because of that. So I mean, hats off to everybody involved. I mean, it's Davis, it's Sharon, Josh Rose also is a writer for the series, who started doing Tall Tales, but now is moved on to writing the other our later volumes for Auric when we eventually get to it. But and then aside from that, in terms of Lev Gleason, I think one of my favorite projects that I've done, aside from the 4th season of Captain Canuck, the invasion season.
That was an awesome
probably
series.
One of my favorites. One of my favorite seasons. That was really, really cool, especially when they told us that the first issue was going to be available in Free Comic Book Day. So that was really cool. That Leonard Kirk was doing the art. We had Jay Baruchel, writing it along with Van Jensen, and then so that was the issue. I guess that was the prelude issue, where the CN Tower gets blown up at the neck, and Captain Canuck catches it, and then he lifts it and throws it right back at the alien ship. Probably probably like the number one, top 3, if not number 1.
Yeah, that's one of those Captain America punching Hitler moments,
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Or when he makes the ultimate sacrifice at the end of the series, at the end of the season, to save everybody. But we know that.
Talking about this, the invasion arc, the Canuck Beyond, and all that's going on. Have you noticed? I did a video about this. I don't know if you saw it or not, but how the overall story arc of the 2015 reboot of Captain Canuck through to current parallels very closely the overall story arc of the original Captain Canuck, 1975 to 81.
How so?
Well, there's a whole lot of story beats in it. One thing is the Captain Canuck fighting the polar bear. That happens in near the beginning of either story. They both stories start with a big explosion or fire or whatever. Then there's an invasion, and then Captain Canuck. Okay, this is spoilers for anybody that hasn't read any of this. just to warn you. at the end of the invasion, in the original Captain Canuck, he jumps through a portal or gets knocked through a portal and goes back in time. And then at the end of the invasion in the reboot, he gets sent through a portal to, not through time, as far as we know, but through space to a completely different place where he's got to figure out how to get back.
Yep.
So there's more to it than that, even. But that's kind of the overall, and I just thought it was really fascinating how it.
That's really interesting. Now that you mention that wow, that really does line up really nicely. Wow, I didn't even consider that before.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
It's funny as I was reading it, I'm going, boy, these story beats. I mean, even Blue Fox in the original, right in the first issue, he's a turncoat and turns on Captain Canuck, right? But he did work for CISO.
That's right, yeah.
With Captain Canuck. And in the reboot, Blue Fox, although she's female now, she sneaks into Equilibrium as an employee. So she's working for, whether really or not, I think she was actually listed as an employee, if I remember correctly. The same.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so they're working for the same company, and she turns out to be obviously a turncoat against him from the very beginning, but started off. So just there's really interesting little parallels all the way through.
That's really funny. And also considering, if you look at the publication history too, you had Captain Canuck, and I believe Northguard came out, the original one, and then I think Beyond, or Richard Conley did Beyond a little. I think after that, I can't remember if I might be wrong on that, but if that's the case, then it kind of parallels the publishing the publishing dates for the reboot. So you have Captain Canuck, and then you had the Northguard reboot in the universe, and then Beyond comes after. So it's almost kind of like that also lines up.
Beyond was actually, I think, the third or fourth issue. It was the B story in the original Captain Canuck. And I loved it. Especially, I thought the Piggymen were hysterical, but I don't think they're going to bring back the Piggymen. That was a little bit much. But
well, fair enough. I mean, well, to be fair, when I read the original book or the original series, it was all in trade. I could never actually read the single issues. So I didn't realize that Beyond was in the back of them. I probably should have known. I'm going to have to turn in my card for that. But
I don't have all of them. I used to have just about all of them, the original single issues.
Yeah.
In the course of the many moves I've had to do, I've misplaced a few of them, but I still have a number of them, and they all had a B story. One of the B stories was Catman.
Oh yeah, I heard about it. I think I read about that one. Yeah,
that one. Some people, I think, there were some people that really liked it, but I preferred the fantasy of Beyond.
I think there was a lot of story beats and like elements that carried over from the original Beyond into Canuck Beyond. But the fantasy is still there, and it is a fantastic story. The new Canuck Beyond,
and the characters, I love the characters. The blind knight, Sir Brant.
Oh yeah.
The Pook, the little pixie or whatever it is, and all the other ones I can't think of their names right off the top of my head right now. But the Sandinar, the characters were interesting. Now, I haven't finished I don't know if they've got them. I haven't got the last couple issues of Lev Gleason Presents, so I don't know exactly what I'm missing there. But in the original, Sandinar turned out to be a traitor. He was working for the bad guys all along, so be very interesting. You probably know, so don't tell me. But
I have. I mean, I have completed like all the work is done, and I believe it's it's getting lined up, I think, for the new Lev Gleason Presents. I know I think 5 and 6 are available digitally through the app. So we're still going. Yeah, we're well into like Lev Gleason 10 or something like that, or even more. I mean, there has been a lull because of the pandemic was a big factor, and
Yes.
all the paper shortages was a huge factor. Still, I mean, still kind of is.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that big
the huge omnibus. Yeah,
the omnibus one. Yeah, I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, still
The
we're
kids
still
ordered it for me for my birthday a year ago in March. So still waiting for that. I definitely want to get it, so I'm definitely waiting for it. So to get back on track here, I don't mind the sides; they're fun. I just don't want to take too much of your time.
No, we're good.
So what projects are you working on right now?
So, I mean, do you want just Lev Gleason, or do you want everything?
Whatever you want to mention.
Fair enough. Well, I've had the privilege of not only to getting to work with all these books. I remember Keith and I were talking even way back when, a few years ago. He told me the plan of like what's going to be happening in the next few years, and so the book, the new book Equilibrium that came out just this past Free Comic Book Day. We've been talking about that for years, or at least for the last couple of years. It's like that's going to be the big team up book. That's going to be like the Justice League or the Avengers kind of thing. So that it was a long time coming, and I think it was a great first issue. There's a lot to unpack there.
One of the things I really like about what Comic House is doing is taking these old characters from the 40s, like the Claw and so forth, and Johnny Canuck and all these other ones, and bringing them into this universe in a modern retelling. Silver Streak, all these other ones.
You took it right out of my
fascinating.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. That was definitely one of the coolest things. Is that basically right after I guess the company was acquired by Lev Gleason, and we kind of did the whole shift to this new imprint. The one thing that we wanted to do was to bring those old Golden Age characters that were published by the original Lev Gleason, or they were created by him, or people, and then there's also Charles Biro. I mean, a lot of these the classic creators who haven't really gotten their due, over the years, and bring them back and and retell them. I mean, mind you, Dynamite did already do that with Project Superpowers. So like they brought in like Daredevil, but they called him, I think it's just the Death Defying Devil or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to get to work on these characters, of these new versions of these characters, it's super cool and rewarding to see how these new writers are taking interpreting these new characters and how they fit into the universe, and how they will interact with Captain Canuck, when they ever meet them. And it's been really, really cool to do that. And there's a lot of really cool books still coming down the pipeline. We had the introduction of Crime Buster, teenage super, vigilante.
That was Crime Buster, the character that was created for the TV series about Crime Buster that Colin. I'm not communicating very well here. I apologize.
No, well, you know what? I'm to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not familiar with the character's history. But I do. I think it was Boy Comics. I think it was originally. I think it was in Boy Comics, or there was another book called like Crime Does Not Pay or something like that. I think those were the titles. But we brought Crime Buster in. You can see him in Invasion. There's a scene or two with the character that you see him and Swoop and like the original. I think it's a trio. I forget the name of the third name, but you see them in Invasion. So Invasion really is the turning point for how the next saga or the next wave of books comes out.
That arc really introduced the entire chapter verse at the time. I don't know, comic house verse now. I don't know, I don't know what you call it.
The comic house universe, the CHU, I guess we're calling it. I don't think we have a. I don't think we ever.
I like chapter verse. That worked great, but
it did. Now comic house universe, yeah, CHU. It's too close. I don't know. Anyway, it was definitely the moment or the point where they introduced a whole whack of characters, which was great. And
I was reading that and I was looking up who these people were as I was going through it.
Yeah,
because it was just fascinating. The histories of those characters and the history of the comic books of themselves, just comic books in general. During that time.
Oh, absolutely. Tons of these new characters coming out. We have Silver Streak's out. We have our version of the Daredevil, which is Bart Hill. I get a lot of questions asked about like, aren't you worried about Marvel getting involved or whatever? I'm like, no, it's because, well, first of all, the book isn't called Daredevil. It's called The Greatest Name in Comics: Daredevil. Or I think it's The Greatest Name in Comics. Daredevil. I don't even know if there's a colon.
Which character came first? Was Daredevil Marvel's Daredevil?
I would say the Lev Gleason version of Daredevil came first.
That's what I thought.
I think Daredevil came out in the 60s, or the Marvel version came out in the 60s, but the Lev Gleason version came out in the 40s, I believe. So I think he had him beat by 20 years or so.
Yeah,
I might be getting the dates mixed up, but
he should be suing Marvel.
I think it's kind of too late for that now, but it's either way. They're really the only similarities is the name, and that's kind of where it ends. And then that there are two different characters with two different backstories and different skill sets.
So Lev Gleason and Comic House and Auric and all that included or aside, do you have a dream job or a dream book that you would love to do?
So, I mean, it's a great
question. Art or lettering.
Or lettering. It's a great question. And I kind of recently checked that box off. At least one of, I have a wish list, but one of the wish lists or items that I got to finally check off was I get to work with one of my all-time favorite people, Kevin Smith.
Oh, cool.
So yeah.
What are you doing with him?
Lettering.
Lettering.
Yeah. So Kevin Smith, for people don't know, he's a writer director. He did Clerks, Jay and Silent Bob reboot. Yeah. He's recently he did Reboot. And he's doing Clerks 3 this fall. So Clerks 3 is coming out this fall, which is super exciting. Anyway, so he's written comics in the past. He wrote Batman, Green Hornet, and a smattering of others. But so Dark Horse is giving him his own imprint. So it's Dark Horse and his own imprint called Secret Stash Press, which is a spin-off of his comic book store in Jersey called Jay and Silent Bob's Secret Stash. He has his own comic book store. So he has his own imprint, and he's writing comics again. So I'm actually working on right now 2 books for him. So one is called Masquerade, and it's an adult, like mature story, and that one kind of follows the story of a social media influencer who actually secretly moonlights as a murderous vigilante.
Oh, murderous vigilante.
Yes, and hell bent on revenge. Mm-hmm. So because she can't, because of her status as a celebrity and she's very well known, her ability to sleuth around, or move around stealthily, is
Highly impeded.
incredibly difficult. So she has this mask, and she is able to scan another person's face, and then that mask kind of forms into that person's face.
Oh, fascinating.
And that's how she gets around. So hence
That's
the
cool.
name, Masquerade, which is really cool. I've already done
Shades of Arnold Schwarzenegger there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we did 2 issues of that already, and then the first issue is scheduled to come out September 14th, I believe. So about a month from now. And the second book is called Quick Stops, and it's an anthology book set in his movie universe. So it features Jane, Silent Bob, the cast of Clerks, from Chasing Amy, Dogma. Yeah, so he wants to, every issue is going to tell a story of like a secondary or tertiary character, and how it connects to the overall universe and timeline. So super exciting that I got to meet him in person in Calgary back in April. And that was just an amazing experience to actually finally, get to meet him and just talk to him. And he, there was a lot of back and forth through Instagram and Twitter. So he kind of knew who I was through the fan art that I was doing. Mm-hmm. So when I finally met him in person, he's like, "Oh, hey, is that like your handle is the Fat Man Who Letters?" Surprisingly, he remembered that. And he's like, "Do you do that for a living?" And he's like, "That what you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's lettering is essentially my bread and butter for all intents and purposes." So he's like, "Well, do you I'm working on comics. Do you want to come and work on those comics with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." So it's been a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been. And getting and then getting praise, like I'll get emails and with feedback from him, and he's just praising. He'll get praise on the work. He's like, "Oh, you did an amazing job," or a lot of it. For most of the part, it's a lot of small edits and tweaks, but
little edits.
But to get that praise from someone who I've admired for years, and he's been kind of like a spiritual mentor for me. So it's been I feel like repeating myself a lot, but it's been a life change. Yeah, it's a milestone. It really is a milestone for me in my career. But really, I think I'm still kind of working up to doing a Batman book one day. I'd love to do Batman.
Yeah. Have you done anything for like DC or Marvel at all?
No. Or no? Dark Horse now probably is the. I mean, I've done work for Disney through a publisher called Joe Books. They had the license to do Disney Princess, and then I got the opportunity to do some issues for Archie Comics, which is a real blast. Getting to work with legends like Dan Parent and Fernando Ruiz, which then they did Die Kitty Die through Chapter House. They did 3 volumes of that, and I got to work on volume 2 and 3, which was really really fun. So Dark Horse is probably the highest or the most well-known publisher out of the bunch. But I'm slowly working my way up there. I'd love to do something for Marvel. I'd love to do something for DC. And like I said, Batman's probably like, I'll do Batman and then I'll retire. No, I'm kidding.
But like, Batman's the Holy Grail.
Exactly. I think Batman would be the Holy Grail for me.
Yeah.
It's been a whirlwind of a career so far, and I had no intentions of doing lettering from the beginning. I never thought I was going to make a career out of this. I think this was just going to be something I did in addendum to to the comics. But as I've grown professionally, I've realized that no, hey, this is comics. It's just it's part of the assembly line, for the industry.
It's a very important part because it's the pictures are great, but it's pretty hard to tell a story if you don't know what they're saying or thinking or doing.
Unless, mind you, unless it's designed that way and the book is completely silent,
Yes.
like in our Auric book, A Long
Yeah.
Winter. So Davis did.
There
an
are
amazing-
exceptions. There are exceptions, but generally, you need it.
Yeah, it's part of the overall production, and it is, I would say, 80%, maybe more, 90% of the time, it is completely glossed over, and people don't realize how much work actually goes into it. So being a proud comic book letterer, I get to be an advocate for what we do. So I mean, so I get to explain to people, and I get to educate them on what we do and how it's done and why it's important.
Well, you certainly educated me a bit on it as we were talking. I learned a few things.
Well, so, I'm glad.
Hopefully, anyone else who watches this might learn some things too. Just out of curiosity, again, you mentioned that you're not much of a writer, but I was wondering if there was anything that you did do any writing on, or in your lettering, making changes on that because the way that was written didn't work. Just wondering if you had anything like that.
No, I mean, even still to this day, I'm not much of a writer. I mean, I have tons of ideas and premises in my head, but to actually get that down on paper or to have it completely fleshed out, no, that's something I struggle with completely.
Yeah.
But
would you be interested in collaborating with somebody to create those stories?
I mean, yeah. I mean, down the line, I think if I can find the right writer or the right person that will take that idea and kind of execute my vision, then absolutely. Like I think I have no short of ideas for a cool comic or a cool comic idea. So I mean, I'd love to do that again one day, maybe after Auric, or I'll kind of sit down and think of another book to do. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking for a while now, and probably taking up a little bit too much of your time. But before we close down, is there anything in particular that you want to mention, or that we haven't covered or talked about?
Well, I mean,
we just tease us in the future.
Well, we will be going to, or at least Lev Gleason. We're going to be at Fan Expo in Toronto. Okay. We just found out that we're going to be going there, so we're kind of like, rushing to get everything prepared. But there are things I want to talk about, but I can't yet.
Okay.
So we'll leave.
No
we'll
hints
leave that
or anything.
No, but I mean, I teased it on Facebook that I actually got to work with one of my all-time favorite artists, and so that was a real treat to work with that person. So once we,
that's something for us all to look forward to.
Yeah, there is that, and then there's going to be hopefully more stuff with Kevin Smith down the line. But we have Masqueraded quick stops that are coming out, and then lots of cool stuff from Lev Gleason. So,
well, thank you very much for taking this time and all this time. Not that anybody's counting, but I really appreciate you taking the time. Enjoyed talking to you and learning about what you do and who you are and why you do what you do.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was a real treat, and appreciate you also taking the time for this too.
All right. Well, have an excellent day and or evening, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.